This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the best comic book podcast for regular comic fans. My name is Daniel Martinez. I am your guest host as Mike is out and about. And on today, I'm joined by two beignets from Cafe du Monde, Tia Vasilio
Bonjour.
and Kate Scotchless.
Hello.
And on today's show, we are going to be talking all about Gambit because that was Mike's birthday request. He could have asked for anything in the world, but he asked for us to read Gambit comics, so somebody finally does. But before that, we're going to close out the loop on Transformers, finally. We've been Transformersing for a couple of weeks now, so I just want to quickly give you an update on the Transformers #1 from Image Skybound that came out this week by Daniel Warren Johnson, with colors by Mike Spicer, letters by Rose Wooden. Yeah, the book rocks. It's amazing. I really loved it. So hopefully everyone else really enjoyed that, and hopefully everyone listening enjoyed our unhinged coverage, extensive coverage too, of the Transformers franchise with the movie episode and then the comics episode. Now you know everything about Transformers that you didn't even know you wanted to know. Now, per my contract, I am legally obligated to ask two questions. So, Kate, how you been? How have comic books been?
I've been good. Comic books have been fantastic. I have a full stack about a foot and a half high of Halloweenish themed comics to read this month, and it has been gray and rainy, and like the wind is blowing the leaves off the trees, and it's perfect atmosphere for it. So this week I read Hollow by Shannon Waters, Brandon Boyer White, and Bernice Snell. It's a YA like coming of tale sort of OGN, which I'm like leveling up, you guys. It's not middle grade. We're getting older. We're getting more mature here. But it's a spinoff on the classic Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And when I say spinoff, I mean like off. This is definitely not a retelling. So we start with our main character, Izzy Crane, who has just relocated to Sleepy Hollow. And she's trying to kind of find her way in this new town and new high school. And the school and the city are just obsessed with Washington Irving's legend of the Headless Horseman. And she's like, that's quaint and also ridiculous because she finds out they all think it's real. And she's like, that's hilarious because ghosts aren't a thing. But are they, you guys? Are they? So I don't want to do spoilers. It takes such a hard right turn into unexpected directions that's so fun. I really want you to go in more blind. So I'm going to say it's cozy, it's gay, and it's perfect Halloween fall vibes. If that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. I think folks who like pumpkin heads or mooncakes would be really into it. It does have a sort of Nimona style art that I found really cute and appealing. Yes, it is just the warm fuzzies, but engaging story and mystery. You have until Halloween night to save your love. You know, all the best things.
That sounds perfect for the type of like weather and the time of the season, and just as everything kind of leaves as we exit summer, that sounds perfect for that. So great read. I think I'm gonna put that on my list because I also love mooncakes. So you've sold me on that one.
Mooncakes is wonderful too.
It is wonderful. Well, let me continue the YA train because I also read. I don't normally get into YA stuff, but in a couple of weeks, we will have Claudia Gray visiting one of our local conventions, and I figured if I'm going to meet this author, maybe I should read something that they worked on. So I read House of L, Book 1, The Shadow Threat. This is by Claudia Gray, illustrated by Eric Sawatsky. In this first graphic novel of a trilogy, we explore Krypton like never before through the eyes of two teenagers on opposite sides of the same extinction level event. I love the drama of like this whole, different houses and the caste system from Krypton because all the Kryptonians, like they were genetically coded to like this is who you have to be in the world, and it really feels very like Divergent and like Hunger Games. Like it gives me those vibes. So I was really enjoying just the introduction to this, but everything is like DC superhero flavored, like with this story of Krypton that I know how it's gonna end, right?
Yeah.
I've read Superman books. I know what's gonna happen soon. But either way, I am very invested in these characters. The art is beautiful. I love how the art team just portrays the all the technology stuff at the with the upper levels of Krypton, and how we get down and things get a little bit grittier and darker in the other sectors of Krypton. So I think it's really fun, and I'm look like once I picked up the book, I read it. It's like 100 and something, like 170 pages. I just devoured it that night, and I would have kept reading if it hadn't. It was already like 11 at night, and I had to go to sleep. But otherwise, I would have kept reading because these are all on the DC Infinite app, so I can read
Mm-hmm.
them there. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to ask some questions to the author. Hopefully that comes to fruition in a couple of weeks. But yeah, that was really really fun. Now, Tia, how are you and how are comic books been?
I'm okay. I don't know if everyone can hear my cat screaming at me in the background or if Zander is going to do his magic and edit her out. But, she has like been super clingy lately. And so she has permitted me to read some comic books, but sitting at my desk to record this apparently is a bridge too far. So just to let you guys know, this is unapproved behavior.
It's
My Go ahead.
it's good to have an extra voice, I think, on the podcast every once in a while, right? So if Holiday wants to chime in, go for it.
Okay, yeah, she had some Gambit thoughts for later, maybe. But I read A Haunted Girl, which is one of four. It's going to be a mini series. It's by Ethan Sachs and Naomi Sachs. They're a father-daughter writing team, which is pretty cool. And the art is by Marco Lorenzana. And the story is about Cleo. She's an adopted teenage Japanese American. And basically, when we meet her, she is wrapping up a stay in a psych ward because she has really severe depression. And so the story is about her kind of trying to go back to her old life, go back to school. And the problem is that she's having these like really terrifying, what people are telling her are nightmares. She's being visited by these ghosts. And it's like a problem that is not really related to the depression problem. Seemingly, we kind of find out in the course of the story that like there might be something going on there. So, I mean, look, I chose the book because the cover reminded me of The Crow, and it seems like it's going to be like a very emotional kind of horror story. Which, like, I don't know, it there's an essay in the back by Ethan Sachs explaining like that this is, inspired by their real experience. And it made me a little bit uncomfortable at first because I was like, oh man, like, you know, if I were a teenager and I was in a psych ward, that I would not want a book written about that. But then he clarified that she's co-writing it with him, so I'm glad that she's getting to tell her story in a way that I hope is like healing for her in her own terms. Like, I think that that's a good thing. And then to get back to the book itself, like it's super J horror vibes, but also Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, okay.
And yeah,
You had me at Haunting of Hill House.
I know, right? And seriously, you guys, I want to rewatch it so bad, but I can't because I'm too scared.
It is the time to do it right now.
Holiday's not going to protect me, okay?
I'll buddy watch it with you if you're
Okay.
serious, because I also can't watch it alone.
It's not the watching it part that's the problem. It's the going to bed later that night that's the problem.
See, for me, if I can heckle watch it with someone, we're good. It's the
yeah.
being
Heckle the
alone
ghosts.
watching it and getting too. Yep. But yeah, do you mean it's like that in the unreliable narrator sense?
I mean, it's like that in the like a person is being haunted, and it's kind of like focusing in and out of her real life, like horrifying experience with depression and like, near suicide, not wanting to be alive. But then also like she has some kind of power or like, I don't know, role with these ghosts that she has to fulfill. So it's kind of like she's got to dig deep and, find the will to live to engage with these ghosts somehow. I actually found the whole thing to be kind of like a metaphor for the horrors of the transition from girlhood to womanhood, which I think is actually like a really common way that you could tell a story like this and like use horror, because like, let's be real, it's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I thought was interesting, and I'll like call back to this later when we talk about the Gambit book that I read. So I was talking to a friend who's like a super comic book person. He's a writer, he's an artist, he's been around forever, and he has a lot of opinions about Gambit too. And so we were talking about how different the art style was in the 90s, and it almost felt like a historical artifact. Like I couldn't even hate on it, even though it's not really my aesthetic, because it's just so different. And it just seemed really noteworthy to mention that. And he was like, well, yeah, now comic books are all like, paraphrasing here, but basically like the idea behind our conversation was that comic books are now so self-conscious of the way that they feed into like other media as IP, that a lot of reading this book specifically, I felt like the visuals compared to Gambit were so sparse and economical. Like there was very little melodrama in the art, even though there were a lot of big visuals relating to like the supernatural aspects. And yeah, it's just like comics in the 90s were their own thing. Comics now, they have to engage with different forms of visual storytelling. And that was really evident in this book. Like it looked like storyboarding for a film.
I can definitely see that. So I've also read this book. We read it for our stream this week, and I'm a big fan of Ethan Sachs, like from Star Wars stuff and a lot of the stuff that he's done with the Old Man Logan Wasteland spin-offs. Like there's a lot of spin-offs now out of that universe, and Ethan Sachs written a lot of those. But to echo what you said earlier, Tia, like I felt like I was being intrusive in this story, and I'm like, am I even supposed to be reading this? Is this for me? Very similar to when I read It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth from Zoe Thorogood. Like I was like, I don't know if this is like, am I supposed to be reading this book? Like it's very personal, I feels. But and then I read the letter in the back, and it all kind of really clicked. But I love the visuals. I got a lot of like, The Ring or The Grudge, the vibes, because those are movies that are ingrained in my conscience from when I was a teenager. So yeah, I also very much enjoyed it, and it's a 1 and 4, so like miniseries. I'm here for them because it's a low commitment.
Yeah, and I think that there's less pressure on the creative team to like spin it out for a long time, so that they are going to have like, the story of the entire book like is being told at the pace that they are planning to tell it, beginning to end.
Yeah, for sure, it's definitely great for the season as well. There's a lot of visuals that I'm like, oh my goodness, that's terrifying. How do you draw this? So well, let me talk about one last book before we get onto the top of our pile. And this is a book that I'm surprised I hadn't read years ago, because everybody puts this like they just really talk about it. The book I read was Daredevil: Born Again. This is written by Frank Miller with art by David Mazzucchelli. This is one of those books that I don't know, people always have on lists, and I don't know if this isn't a book that I would recommend to somebody getting into comics, but I would recommend to like, hey, do you want to see why people thought comics were cool back in the 90s? Like this is probably something you want to take a look at. In the book, Kingpin systematically takes apart the life of Matt Murdock after finding out his identity. And I will say, there's a lot of stuff in the story that hasn't aged well, or maybe shouldn't have even been part of the story to begin with, but that's the Frank Miller of it all. But the saving grace of this book to me is David Mazzucchelli's art is fantastic. Like in the back of my head, I kept thinking like, is this better than the work that he did in Batman Year One? But like, who am I to make those decisions, right? I think art is very personal, but boy, I was really excited to get into this book. Like the first half of the book is very strong as far as like the story and the art. I think it loses a little bit of steam towards the end because this is an ongoing series, so like comics can't really have finality. But that's just an aspect of comics that I've learned to live with. But yeah, I finally feels like I've crossed a big one of my list of like things I should read. But yeah, Daredevil Born Again was quite a well, like we read it for book club, so we all had a very good time discussing that book. Now let's move on to the top of our pile, and I'm gonna start with some of the Discord picks. So we have a few folks in the Discord listening live. So Hannah's reading Poison Ivy, which I'm also reading. I'm waiting for the next trade to come out, and Matt is reading Knights #1. But Kate, what's on the top of your pile? What are you reading next?
I am really looking forward to Night Fever by Ed Brubaker. It's illustrated by Sean Phillips and colors by Jacob Phillips. It's next on my pile because it's due in 2 days and cannot be renewed. Ergo, has to get read. But it looks super cool. This is the like kind of dark noir. You're in Europe on a business trip and can't sleep and find yourself wandering the night in this European country, and it's supposed to be like suspenseful, I think, and kind of a Jekyll and Hyde story of the darkness within yourself and so on and so forth. It looks, and here's why I picked it up, Halloweeny. Is it seasonally appropriate? That's the question you have to ask yourself. It looks like the answer is yes, so I'm excited for it. Also, do you ever really go wrong with Ed Brubaker? Not usually. So, have you guys read this one already? I know a lot of you guys on the pod have.
Yeah, I read this back when Image was promoting this book a while back. So like they sent a review copy and I read it and I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to talk about this book. So I'm very excited for your journey, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. Maybe next time you're on the podcast because I quite enjoyed it, but it's definitely very different than some of the previous stories that Brubaker and Phillips have done for some of their other quarterly books. So I'm very excited to hear the reception on this because, like I said, it's different, but it's still like the team is quality. So yeah.
Yeah, I got it instead of reading the like review copy stuff on my iPad. I did get my library. Crazily enough, got a really nice hardcover copy of the trade, and so I was like, heck yeah! So grab that.
They always print those books with such nice quality. Like it's a little hardback and it's a little pricier than normal, but I think it's worth it because it looks really like all my Brubaker Phillips books. Like they look really nice on the shelf. So
Yeah.
cool. Tia, what are you reading next?
Well, I feel like if we're doing seasonally appropriate, since it's New York Comic Con as we're recording this, and I really love this book and it came out, we should talk about Parasocial by Alex DeCampi and Erica Henderson, which is basically Misery, the Stephen King novel Misery for nerds. It's about like a D-list actor who does the con circuit with the autographs and pictures that people can buy, and a very overzealous fan, and how that doesn't go great for either of them. And it's like, look, not to say anything bad about nerds, but I think everyone involved in the nerd sphere, whether they're a creator or a fan, like we all can relate to the experience of just like getting a little bit too excited or like alternately feeling a little bit uncomfortable with social interactions. So this definitely, I think, like is a fair sort of like take. Nobody is like, everybody's bad, everybody's terrible, but also like nobody is entirely a villain. Like you understand. I'm not, maybe I shouldn't say that they're not the villain, because there's definitely like some right and wrong going on here. But I mean, like it does, I think, sympathetically examine how sort of dysfunctional the social dynamics of nerd culture are. We'll say that. And also it's a beautiful hardcover as well. So like on the topic of beautiful hardcovers.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have been at either like a comic book panel or maybe waiting in line at a signing, and then somebody does something, and even you feel like third party and like awkward for the whole
Yes.
situation.
Yeah.
So
Or like
uh,
thinking that you know someone because you follow them on social media.
mhm.
I'm sure that everyone's been guilty of that in some capacity, or like conversely, having people be a little too familiar with you. Yeah, so it's and also, I mean, I think that Erica Henderson is a really incredible artist, and so many people, I feel like, really kind of box her in with like Squirrel Girl, cute, but she has like a range, y'all. So the art here is pretty fantastic.
I think people should do some homework and maybe read this before going to New York Comic Con, so you maybe you get a lesson out of it, before on how to behave or not behave
How to
at a
not be.
con. Cool. All right. Well, for my pick, this should come as surprise to no one. I'm reading a Batman book. This is Batman City of Madness #1. Now, to be fair, I think I would have picked a book by this author regardless of whether it was a Batman book or not. This is written by and art by Christian Ward. So like,
Favorite.
yeah, so that's just a bonus that it's a bonus that it's a Batman book. In this book, buried deep beneath Gotham, there exists another Gotham. This Gotham below is a living nightmare populated by twisted mirrors of our Gotham's denizens, fueled by the fear and hatred flowing down from above. For decades, the doorway between the cities has been sealed and heavily guarded by the Court of Owls. But now the door swings wide open and a twisted version of the Dark Knight has escaped to trap and train his own Robin. So this already has like it crosses a lot of things off my checklist. Batman, Christian Ward, the Court of Owls. Like how else would this not like be at the top of my pile? So I'm very excited to get into this. I have the book, but I didn't read it on purpose just so I could put it on the top of my pile for the show. But it comes out next week, and I'm very excited for people to get into it. So let's take a break. We'll come back and get real deep into Gambit. I'm looking at our notes, and I think it's going to be a really fun and unhinged and very interesting discussion. So we'll come back in just a second. For our main topic today, we will be talking about some Gambit books that we read. But before that, make sure to check us out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads, and YouTube. And support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. And you can follow along with our semi-regular updates for free today. What an offer. Mike is such a generous person on his birthday, setting up the Patreon for you to check it out for free. You don't want to miss out on that deal of a lifetime, I think. So for today's episode, um, Mike, I feel like Mike just kind of threw a grenade at us and then walked away, saying like, "Hey guys, it's my birthday coming up. It's my birthday, so here's a list of Gambit comics you can read, and then pick some or all of them or whatever, and then talk about them." So like, we really had very little choice as to this assignment, but I feel like we all really embraced it, only because we like Mike. But do we like Gambit? We will find out. So Tia, I'm gonna throw it back to you because from our list, I feel like you read some of the older stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience? Well, actually, before that, what's your prior experience with Gambit before this episode?
Primarily the 90s cartoon, honestly, and like briefly feeling betrayed that we never got the Texas Forever Gambit, and like I never was in favor of the Channing Tatum Gambit, so I was like not that disappointed that didn't get made. But yeah, that was my only Gambit experience.
Okay, cool. Well, tell us a little bit about what you read.
Well, strap in, ladies and gentlemen, because I have a lot of thoughts. And I have detailed notes in the show notes and screenshots, which I think Patreon subscribers have access to. So just saying, you might want to check that out. But I read Gambit 1 through 4 from 1993. So that was I think was one of the oldest ones on the list, and I believe it was the first solo Gambit book, right?
I think so, because his debut was not too far like before that.
Right. So, letterer, Richard Starkings, inker, Klaus Janson, writer, Howard Mackey, colorist, Steve Bucatello, penciler, Lee Weeks. Like, we're peak 90s here, peak 90s comics. So you guys all know that usually I get really into analysis. I am just going to go down the list of my reactions to the plot of this book, okay?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, apparently there's like families of thieves and families of assassins in New Orleans, and they are fighting, and the assassins like can sometimes come back from the dead, and then every 7 years the tithe man comes and like everything goes to hell. Okay, so like scene. Was nobody going to tell me about Henri LeBeau and his mustache? Apparently Gambit had a brother. Spoiler alert, he dies in like the first 2 pages, but before that, amazing mustache.
That mustache got fridged.
Yes. Was no one going to tell me Gambit was like married? I had to find out this way. Come on, you guys.
I didn't know that.
I also found out on this episode, because I read something that kind of summarizes Gambit in like one issue, and I was like, he was what? Like there was a wedding? Oh my god! Go ahead, Tia.
Married, full on married. So like Rogue is pining, and honestly, we can get into this later, but my theory is this is why we love Gambit. We don't actually like Gambit. We love Rogue, and Rogue loves Gambit, so we love Gambit through Rogue. I also would like to point out that like poor Rogue has a like close up ass shot in at least every like once an issue, where like there's the scene and like framing it is like on one side it's like Wolverine's bicep, which is the same size as his head, and on the other side, and then in the middle there's like the action happening, and on the other side is like Rogue's 2 ass cheeks that are also the same size as Wolverine's bicep and head. This happens at least once an issue. I have put the screenshots in the notes. Okay,
hold on. Once each cheek is the size of someone's head. I think the proper terminology is badonkadonk.
Extreme but close up. Okay, too close. Also.
I'm looking at the shot, and I think Klaus Janson spent a little bit of time rendering that butt and that arm, and not enough time on everything else on the page.
No, the butt is lovingly inked for sure. Rogue's breasts are also lovingly inked throughout. So anyway, the other artistic thing I will call out is I really wanted to choose my Gambit book based on how unhinged they drew his hair. And Lee Weeks really said, say less. Like, I was not disappointed. So there's a lot of Rogue pining. I'm here for the pining. I'm here for the doomed romance. There's a lot of inappropriate flirting. We all know the kind of guy Gambit is. So like, I feel like I made a good choice. But then we find out that Gambit and his wife, whose name is Belladonna, it's like a Romeo and Juliet thing. Like, he's a thief and she's an assassin. So it's like very Montagues and Capulets. Like, I'm loving this so far. Okay. And then you have a Rogue, and it's just so sad. But then also Belladonna's like mostly dead. And we all know there's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. So like, that's kind of throwing a wrench into the whole situation. And apparently the thieves have something called the elixir of life, which could save her. But like, Gambit can't give it to her because of the Romeo and Juliet thing. Also, people tell me that like Belladonna is not a popular character, which A, tells me that she comes back in other books, and B, like, why? Cowards, why?
One of the books I read had a warning in the not a warning, but in the summary had a little note like from the editorial, like, don't worry, Belladonna's not in this series. And I was like, that's so mean. Like, and granted, I haven't read much other than that one shot that had all this stuff in it, but I was like, that's so mean to do to one character.
Yeah, so people hate her, but again, probably because everyone loves Rogue. Like, I'm just saying.
True. That is why I like Gambit. You hit the nail on the head.
Totally. Like, pack it up. We can go home. Unless you want to hear more about Not Dead Julian and the incest.
Wait, what?
So Belladonna has a brother. I call him Not Dead Julian because apparently he's supposed to be dead, but he's not dead. And he's like really mad about getting the elixir of life for Belladonna. So I'm getting like incest vibes. It's giving Prince Nuada from Hellboy and the Golden Army a little bit. And so it's weird because it's like Gambit's after the elixir of life, Julian's after it. Like they both want to be the one to give it to her. Like, I don't know what's happening. But then, so like Rogue is babysitting the almost not quite dead body of Belladonna while Gambit goes to try to find the elixir of life. And like Unrequited Love Rogue is super savage. She's like, should I steal this bitch's memories of the dude that I want? Like, maybe.
Come here, I just want to shake your hand.
Yeah, for real. It's like, girl, don't do it. This is the mutant equivalent of like stalking the exes on Instagram. Like, that never goes well. Don't do it.
And I think also it might kill her if you start to drain her powers.
Unlike stalking the exes on Instagram, it might also kill her. And then Fuckboy Gambit has found... Okay, so apparently the whole reason for the Thieves Assassin setup and like the reason that the elixir of life is around is there's this being who happens to be a hot blonde in red lingerie. They call her an external. I guess Eternals was already taken. And of course, Gambit has hooked up with her, naturally. Gambit, by the way, has hooked up with every woman in this book except for this one old lady. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if that also happened. But so he goes to visit his old flame. We also get a weird butt shot of her. So don't worry, there's butt shots for everyone. Yeah, truly, like, Gambit does not deserve Rogue. She is literally babysitting his dead wife, who he wants to bring back to life. And don't you just hate it when you have to defend your immortal former hookup from your mostly dead wife's brother, who wants to kill you both so he can have her all to himself, but you need to get back to your not dead wife's bedside where your current fling is keeping watch over her and reliving all your memories of being married to her. Because, like, that's POV or Gambit on a random Tuesday, apparently.
I hate when that happens. Like...
So then, plot twist, not dead Julian does not want to fuck his sister. He just wants to get Gambit to steal the elixirs of life so that Julian can take them for himself and live forever and not save his sister, which like is classic sibling shit. That makes so much more sense than the incest. But also plot twist, if you take the elixir, apparently it makes you hideously ugly. And so then Gambit's like, is it really worth having a not hot wife? I don't know. He's like really like thinking this over. So Rogue is over here like, I love you, Gambit. And he's like, hang on, baby, I'm saving my wife. And drama. Fighting. Belladonna wakes up. But yay, amnesia divorce. She doesn't remember Gambit or anything. And he's like, oh, hey, baby, we were just friends. Here's your dad. He's going to take you home now. The end. And then we have this great romance novel cover shot of Rogue and Gambit and their Lee Weeks hair and also a bunch of random Gambit art in the back of the book, including this like completely deranged basketball with Logan situation that I don't know why it was in there.
It feels like an ad in those magazines, because especially because of the Gambit at Play bit. Like it feels like they were maybe trying to sell cologne or something like that in between some of the adventures in the comic.
Like, honestly, I'm just saying this has been drawn by a man who has never seen basketball, but has definitely seen homoeroticism.
The hair is fantastic. I love how long it is under the hat.
Sometimes he has a giant ponytail.
Yeah.
Is it like Ariana Grande's ponytail? Where it like comes out?
You think that Gambit has extensions?
Yeah,
woven
totally
in?
has extensions.
You're going to look at that
Pretty
drawing and tell me he doesn't?
That's true.
So yeah, like I think the best punishment for Gambit ultimately is to be in love with a woman that he can't touch or that would like really injure him if he did, because it's just like the best poetic justice for a total fuckboy. And that is what Gambit is after reading this book. Like that is all he is.
Wow, I have many questions. I think priceless reactions, but first of all, what? So, one of the things I want to talk about because it hasn't evolved much. How do you guys feel about Gambit's headpiece? The little the little thing that has that it feels very 90s. But how do you guys feel like as a fashion choice? That and the trench coat. How do you guys feel about that?
The trench coat is explained in the miniseries I read by Kelly Thompson from 2018. It turns out it's because the rest of the superheroes on the X-Men are just wearing skin tight spandex, so they can't offer their jacket to a lady who just had her clothes shredded off and is a little chilly. And so he thinks ahead. Uh, um, yeah, it's
That would
certainly a
happen
look.
with people around Gambit.
I think someone was a moody 90s teenager and like put that on the page.
That is a great point, though, that everyone else's costume is really skin tight, and the trench coat shows the action a lot more in the still medium like comics.
And to be clear, his costume is skin tight too, but it's under said trench coat.
Yeah,
I mean, he'll show you anything under that trench coat. Like all you have to do is ask.
Yep.
You might not even have to ask. Like he would totally send you dick pics.
Oh no, Gambit. Just never give him a phone ever.
The thing about the early 90s Gambit is those that gets me with the costume is those like over the knee metal boots.
Listen, as someone who tried to make over the knee metal boots for cosplay, like what the fuck?
They're really useful for fighting, I guess. Like,
I don't know that it's practical.
I was gonna say you couldn't move very well though.
Yeah, if you like don't need to bend your knees for any reason, they're great.
Oh my goodness, this insanity that you read. Yeah, I'm only looking at a few panels that we have in the docs, and I'm like, do I want to read this? I don't think I do, but the way you kind of sold it,
it's super fun.
Okay, that's probably going on the list. I'm kind of glad we all read different eras of Gambit. Yeah, we'll circle back to everyone's thoughts, but let's kind of keep the train moving. Kate, what is your history with Gambit prior to this episode?
Limited. So I came to the X-Men originally back when the original X-Men movies were coming out. I loved them. Was not a comics reader at the time, so I didn't have criticism along that regard. I had not watched the X-Men 90s cartoon because my parents were solidly of the 90s parenting mentality that watching violent cartoons would make you violent as a child. So, saved my precious little brain from that. And so when I started reading X-Men, that's when I got to see the broader cast and characters, right? And Gambit shows up here and there, and I honestly couldn't pinpoint. I read a lot of X-Men in the like 2012, 2015 era that was coming out. But I had never read a dedicated Gambit book or a Gambit and Rogue book. So that was a first for me. So I read part of one issue of one of the 90s series. It was the number one of the Gambit series from 1997, just titled Gambit, written by Howard Mackey, pencils by Claude Janson. And I don't think either of them had ever heard anyone from New Orleans speak. Because we see Gambit swinging in, and he says into the scene at the start of this comic, saying, "It feels good to be back in the life. I need this like the gators need the swamp." Now, how many of you have heard the phrase or uttered, "I need this like the gators need the swamp"?
I've been to New Orleans and I never saw that on a shirt. So I don't think it's a very common phrase.
He says, bouncing around outer space with the X-Men, saving civilizations. It's all well and good.
Jamaican.
But exactly. A man's got to cut loose sometimes. And ever since I was just a pup back in New Orleans, there was only one thing that could help me forget my troubles. Stealing!
No, but I love these 90s. Like, the 90s was just a different time. It was just this different era of cultural sensitivity.
Truly.
Or lack of.
Truly. And like, we're expected in this comic to believe he's like stealthily moving around buildings, stealing precious artwork and stuff in thigh-high metal boots. Like, so stealthy. Like, come on.
I'm just picturing the Tin Man.
Yeah, with a fluorescent pink top.
Yes, exactly. So what I actually spent the most time reading was Rogue and Gambit from 2018, which is a 5-part miniseries by Kelly Thompson, pencils and inks by Pere Perez, colors by Frank de Armada, and letters by V.S. Joe Caramanga. Caramangana? There we go. We got it. Nailed it. Their accents, a little better. But like, just a little, you guys.
It only took 20 years or so to make a small advance on their accents.
Yeah. So like, we get this scene, said trench coat scene, where Gambit is taking off and offering his trench coat to Rogue, who has shredded clothes that now conveniently shredded in such a way to be basically a bra and undies. And Gambit says, and this is direct reading, Rogue, your clothes are messed up, girl. And she says, Gambit, thank you. You're my hero or something. Like, what? Kelly Thompson, you can do better than this. Come on.
I feel like now I want to pitch for the Patreon like a dramatic reading of some Gambit books.
Oh my gosh, yes. No, Mike can do it too. If you ever hang out with Mike a few drinks in, ask him to do Gambit.
You heard it. If you ever see Mike at a convention, buy him a beer and buy him a beer and tell him to do a Gambit impression.
So the plot of this miniseries, or the idea is this: they're currently off again, but of their on again, off again relationship, and they're assigned by Kitty Pryde, who's head of the X-Men at this point, to pretend to be a couple on the rocks so that they can go in undercover to investigate this, like, basically wellness therapy retreat where mutants are disappearing. And of course, there's only one bed at the inn. They were expecting 2 rooms,
God, yes.
And so they have to sit in sessions and talk about the history of their relationship. And it's Kelly Thompson does such a good job having them talk about old goofy situations that they were in and like kind of poke fun at them. So they are telling the different parts of their relationship, how they first met and how they first broke up and this and that. And it turns out, spoilers here, fast forward a few minutes, if you don't want spoilers for this 2018 series, that the supervillain Lavish is using this therapy sessions to basically create golems of the X-Men or other mutants, I guess they're not all X-Men, of the version of them in the memory they're sharing. So they're telling heated emotional moments, and then it brings to life a golem of that moment, like in that costume with those powers and such and such. And the more they share, the more they lose their powers, and the powers go into these golems. So naturally, this leads to fighting many versions of themselves all at once. And they repeatedly comment on how cathartic it is to beat the shit out of the other one. So Rogue takes on all the Gambits, and Gambit takes on all the Rogues. And I'm like, hang on. This doesn't sound healthy, you guys.
I mean, it sounds healthier than their relationship just between the two of them. So
that's true. So the thing is, with destroying the golems, you reabsorb the powers and memories. So they start absorbing the other person's point of view from these traumatic instances, right? And realizing how they hurt each other. It's very good. Would recommend reading this. It's on Marvel Unlimited. So they have a kind of coming together. And again, there's only one bed at the inn. Did I say more? And then they like have to take on the rest of the golems, and Rogue, in fighting them, and basically absorbs all these different people's emotions and powers and becomes this totally dope looking extra super duper mutant that should have stick around. It would have been way cooler if they're like, now she's like this for a year. I would have read all those comics. But alas, things get resolved because it's a mini series and life goes on. And now they are, now they're Rogue and Gambit.
That sounds super rad because big fan of Rogue, big fan of the power absorption thing, and you're right. They can spice up the character. I love that we're not talking about Gambit. They can spice up the character by doing that. But wow, what a series of twists and turns.
Yeah. The thing that took me by surprise in this is there's mention of Rogue mentions that she has to find her mom Mystique. And I was like, wait, since when is Mystique Rogue's mom? Is that like a thing that I just didn't know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh. Which I don't know why they don't make a bigger deal of like Nightcrawler and Rogue being like half siblings.
Wait, what?
They don't act like. Well, I mean, Rogue Mystique is also Nightcrawler's mom, so
I didn't know
they barely bring it up. Yeah. Huh. It's a very intricate family tree, I think, with all of them.
She just abandoned both of them, one to the circus, one to foster parents.
Well, Mystique was had other
adoptive
things
parents, I guess,
planned.
but yeah.
Yeah. She had other obligations to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, so she knew that would eventually come around and find her.
Okay.
Wow. That book was giving real marriage stories. That scene with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, where they're just yelling at each other until the end, where they kind of do redeem a little bit more, like where they understand each other. So that was nice. Yeah, I like Kelly Thompson, so I should probably go check this out.
They definitely take advantage of Rogue losing her powers to have extra sexy times at the end. And like, so convenient
for them.
Gambit never misses a beat.
That's right.
Wow. I don't know what I read compares to either one of those stories, but let me give it a shot. Let me tell you guys what I read. So I'm gonna start with the oldest stuff. So I went back and read Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, 266, just because it's the first appearance of Gambit, and it also leads out of one of the other books I read. So that's written by Chris Claremont with pencils by Mike Collins, Joseph Rubinstein on colors, Brad Venkat on colors. There's two inkers, Pat Brousseau and Tom Orsakowski on letters. You rarely see it, two letters in one issue, but real quick, like in this book is kind of nonsense if you jump into the middle of it. But Gambit saves Storm, who's currently a child for some reason. I don't even know. I didn't even look into why Storm is a child at the moment. But the rest of it is nonsense. I don't even remember what happened. It was just like Shadow King, Nanny, and the Orphan Maker are part of it, and they want Gambit to do something. So I was like, well, I'm not digging more into this. So I pivoted to another book called X-Men Origins Gambit, 2009, which, I think this is what the movie that Tia wanted from your mention earlier.
My Texas Forever movie.
That's right.
I don't even know that kid's real name.
It's the Friday Night Light Kids. That's all you need to know.
I
know. It's written by McCrary with art by David Yarden. So this one is the one that kind of fills you in. It's a nice one shot that tells you all about Gambit being married, being in that duel, being exiled from the Thieves Guild. Even though I will say Gambit seems to be very honorable when it comes to that part of it. Like he accepted his fate, and he spared Belladonna the pain of like her also being exiled, because he knew that if they both left, she would eventually. I think Belladonna's like the heir to the Assassins Guild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if they both left, like he knew that she would eventually resent him, and he didn't want that for either of them. But then it goes into like Gambit working for Mr. Sinister to build the Marauders, and like this book leaves off in the page where his first appearance is in the issues. It's a nice prequel, even though this is from 2009. it's a nice prequel to his first appearance because it ends with him being at that hotel where he saved Storm. So that was just nice happenstance that I got a kind of a full story there. And then the last book will be a little bit more nonsense. So I hope you guys are ready for quite a ride. Not as exciting as the 1993 stuff that we just talked about, but I read Gambit from 2012, which a quick gripe for Michael, if you're listening, which I hope you are, you told us to read 1 through 6 of this series, and if I had done that, I wouldn't have finished the story, and I would have been very upset. So I actually read 1 through 7, which doesn't even finish the story, but it's a good stopping point. I feel this is a once. It's called Once a Thief. This is written by James Asmus with art by Clayman, colors by Rachelle Rosenberg, and letters by Corey Petit. There's so much happening here. There's a sexy thief business. There's a heist. There's a kidnapping, demonic dimensions. There's a giant dragon, and of course, because Clayman is writing this book, there's a lot of sexy outfits and poses. And I think I could tell. I think Mike and I are around the same age, so I can tell why he probably likes Gambit. He's just a very suave guy when it comes to like entering a party, which is how we start this book. He meets another thief that he doesn't know is a thief, but of course they're both going after the same thing. They end up getting caught going to Guatemala because they just met and they're going a trip to Guatemala, which there's a lot of implied other stuff that happens in between the pages in the trip. But I think that's just part for the course for a Gambit book. Uh, but this is where things really caught me off guard. They go into this other dimension where like a dragon that looks like King Ghidorah shows up, and the thief double crosses Gambit, and she steals what they were after, and leaves him out there to be kind of kidnapped by the original guy that they stole from. So overall, this story was so convoluted and weird, but because Clayman is on art, we do get a lot of Gambit posing and like not just Gambit, but everyone around him, like just very good looking characters. But yeah, I don't know that I got much out of any of the stories that I read from Gambit, except for that one shot that explains a lot of his backstory. So maybe I should have read some of the stuff you guys read.
Well, you
We had a
can.
great
It's on
time,
Marvel
so.
Unlimited.
Yeah, we sure can. Um, well, we have a few questions, but is there anything else before we go into our questions? TR Kate, is there anything else you guys have on that we didn't cover from any of the books that you read or any other Gambit stuff that you want to chat about?
I feel like we've been very thorough.
Good. Being prepared is a big part of this podcast, and we are nothing if over prepared for this one. So let's talk about some questions that Mike left for us, and I'm gonna combine question 1 and 2, I think, because they seem very similar. Do you understand? And I'm gonna start with Tia. Do you understand why Mike loves this character?
Yes, I think I do. I think I do. I think that I think it's for the same reason that I grudgingly also love this character, which is that first of all, like you guys all need to understand that Mike is such a good sweet boy. Like that is his archetype is good sweet boy. And Gambit obviously is not a good sweet boy, but like he could be on the inside. I don't know. I feel like Gambit isn't necessarily a bad person. He's just kind of how he is. Like maybe he's like a little like thoughtless and flashy and like not super loyal to women, but he is also the guy that like he's the fuck boy who if any woman he's ever fucked in his whole life called him and was like, I need help moving this weekend, I need help with this, I need you to do this, he would be there for them.
So a fuckboy with a heart of gold.
Kind of, yeah. And like Mike is just like a heart of gold with a heart of gold. So, maybe he's interested in another expression of like having a heart of gold.
Okay, that you know what? That's good. That's good to put on the list.
I counterpoint. I think
Oh boy.
that Mike likes Gambit for the same reason that everyone loves Jubilee. Things explode with Gambit. It is a cool freaking power. He runs around with a cool trench coat, saying cool things. He's kind of the bad boy, right? Like he's just a cool character, and I don't know for sure, but I bet Mike started his Gambit love as a teenage boy, and this is like the peak teenage boy character. He has one of those long staffs. He throws things that cards of all things that explode. It's just, yeah, things go boom.
Yeah.
Gambit definitely like has an adolescent quality to him that I think that checks out.
Yeah, I quite agree with both of you actually, because the things I had on my list is I feel like, Mike has talked about like getting cool like biker vests for the podcast. So I know that he wants to be a bad boy. But on the inside he has a heart of gold. So like he in which Gambit overall, like, he's honorable, right? He does a lot of things to keep his honor and the honor of others. So like I definitely understand that. So it's a good, plus I mean that hair. Come on.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that hair? I want to start wearing a headpiece, see what that looks like. And
I think you could do it with the right styling products.
Just a bunch of moose. And maybe take some pointers, get a trench coat in case I ever see a damsel in distress.
That's right.
Cool. Let's see. We have another question. Was Taylor Kitsch the best pick for the live action portrayal? Now, Tia, I feel like you have strong feelings about this.
Yes, I've definitely like made my feelings known about this. I am not a Channing Tatum fan, and I know he's from New Orleans and everything, but as we've established, Gambit is barely from New Orleans, so that doesn't get you more points, Channing.
That's fair. Kate, what do you think about all this? Are you did you watch Wolverine Origins? Do you know all about Taylor Kitsch and his portrayal?
But I didn't know Gambit from the comics at the time, so I really wasn't here nor there about it. I was just like, I loved all of the X-Men movies unironically because they were the X-Men, and it was my first X-Men. I was like, they're awesome. And it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, some of them are just so much cooler in the comics. You mean Rogue's not just a damsel in distress? This is amazing. So, yeah, I had no problems with it at the time, but I think in retrospect, there's better. But I'm not one of those people who's good at, like, I don't know actors' names, so I'm not a fantasy caster, if you will.
Yeah, same. I'm just happy that they keep making movies about comic books. But I mean, Taylor Kitsch, give him another shot. I'm not against it. I think he had a very good look. I think anybody that has long hair can give Gambit a shot if it's styled properly. That's where
but you also
really
like if you watched Friday Night Lights, like I feel like he has that whole like sad boy thing that Gambit sometimes has.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Right.
The Gambit
and he
swagger.
Has honor. He does have the swagger. He has the honor. He literally goes to prison for his brother because his brother's having a baby and he doesn't want his brother to miss it.
Yeah, this is now turning into the Friday Night Lights podcast. Wow. Man, I haven't thought about that show forever. So thanks for that as well, Mike. All right, and the last question we have, is there anything you still don't get about this guy? Now, I'm going to throw it back to Kate. Is there anything you still don't get about Gambit?
No, I think he's pretty self-explanatory, honestly.
Yeah. Tia, anything for you?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of Gambit haters out there, and I just feel like, why do you hate fun? Like, don't overthink it. It's not that deep.
Yeah, I think my only question, and it was partially answered in this episode, which was the trench coat. So thank you very much. The pink tones on a thief's outfit, like the pink neon, doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's questionable. And also his headpiece covers his ears. You'd think a thief would want to be like listening to everything going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
well,
maybe
it depends
the outfit...
on the artist. Sometimes his ears stick out of the headpiece, which is, I think, more fun.
Yeah, I bet it's also way harder to draw, so maybe that's why they covered him up.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I love the playing card stick is really fun. I don't see enough comics about Gambit being good at poker. I feel like he always blows up the table.
The bit should be that he's really bad.
Yeah. Wow. I think we solved Gambit. Like, this was a very productive day for everyone here.
Never need to talk
here,
about him on the podcast again.
Never again.
No.
Unless the patrons, we set a goal and the patrons give us that live reading of Gambit comics and everybody tries a Cajun accent.
And definitely not Jamaican accent.
Okay, cool. Well, as we wrap up the episode, we wanted to send Mike a nice little birthday message. So, we can either share a memory or talk about. And I'll start because I've never met Mike in person, but I think it's really fun to have friends on the internet that you've never met that you still feel like are very cool people. So I'm very thankful that met them in online and also that I get to do this podcast because I love talking about comic books, and then I got to meet all of you guys as well because of Mike. So there's that. Tia, do you have any fond memories of Mike? I know you've met him.
We used to work together, and I actually, yes, I'm feeling like extremely sad and nostalgic about New York Comic Cons gone by, and I remember very vividly the first New York Comic Con when I was working at Comixology, and the Comixology after parties were always like pretty great, and we like had a dance floor going, and I have a really great picture actually, and Mike's in it, and we're all on the dance floor just like being crazy. And yeah, we had a lot of good memories from those days of just like, Comic Cons and after party, like, dance floors and book clubs at work. And so Mike is a really good person. Like, he cares so much about comics, and he does so much good to like make sure that there's good safe spaces for other good comic book people to gather, and I really appreciate that about him.
Great. Kate?
I met Mike when I was the president of my undergrad university's comic book club. And turns out that is a comic book club that one Mike Rapin started at that school years prior. And we were trying to figure out guest speakers and stuff. And our like faculty advisor or staff advisor is one of Mike's friends from undergrad. And it was like, oh, he works at Comixology now. And I was like, oh, maybe we could have him like come talk about that or whatever, like on Zoom, and that is in fact exactly what happened and how I first met Mike, and then started doing the website stuff with him, writing little comics reviews, and then joined the podcast. But the fun part is I have a picture from this club meeting that I every now and then comes up on that like, hey, remember this timeline kind of thing on social media, that is just like an auditorium classroom kind of setup full of current club members. And then at the front of the room is one of these like wall size screens that's pulled down with just Mike's head really big on it. Like not even neck, just chin to forehead, just huge. The God that started your club, behold, he's gone where all of you wish to go, because this was like the prime of Comixology before they started doing things like taking away our pull list site and all those things, and before they got sold to Amazon. And it was a really great meeting, and people were so into it, and it was a great experience. And then I met so many friends through this podcast and through Mike, and but that is my favorite memory, I think.
That's amazing. Well, I think we've done it. So this was really fun. I don't often get to host, probably for good reason, but hopefully this turned out okay.
You did a great job, Danny.
Thank you very much. I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but I'll take it. Also, if you're listening to this, let Mike know how I did. Anyways, as we wrap up the show, we have a comic book question of the week, which is a whole new concept for me, so let's get into it. So if you are listening to this, do you have a favorite place to read comic books? If so, let us know where it is. You can email your answers to ircbpodcast@gmail.com. Mike reads all those emails, so let him know. Next week's topic, we have an IRL episode, ? Mike, Brian, and Kate Lamphere talk about comics in New Jersey and hang out in person. That is insane information. Infinity Shred is the best band. They do our music. Zander is invisible when no one is watching. Thank you, Tia. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you, Zach, for proof listening and everybody else that was on the Discord chat. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.